Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Dawson County Board of Commissioners work session. Today is June 16th, 2022. We welcome all those in attendance as well as those that are with us online. We'll get right into the new business. First up, we have presentation request to approve and fund indigent defense invoicing module. Court Administrator Jason Stevenson. Jason.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Glad to go first. And you've got actually two items. One that will present after me, kind of a renewed and revised request. But the first request is something that wasn't in our calendar year 2022 budget. And we're happy to include it on the 2023 budget. But thought we'd go ahead and bring it up because there's some advantages to acting on it now. What it is an invoicing software for our indigent defense department that handles all the invoicing for juvenile court. So this is a joint recommendation and request from juvenile court and court administration. So as you know, child attorneys and parent attorneys are paid by the county. Last year was the tune of about $215,000 in billing. And right now, all of that billing is handled on our end in an Excel spreadsheet. So this is software that we frankly desperately need to better track and approve. And what it will give the attorneys is an ability to log into the system and submit invoices that we can then monitor and approve before they go to accounts payable. It's an $8,000 expense, and we bring it up now because they just completed the Hall County portion of this. If they can kind of continue their momentum and go straight into Dawson County, they've offered a 10% discount. So it's $8,000 with that discount. If it's not something we want to go ahead and do now, then we can bring it back up in January as part of the next budget cycle. But any questions about what that does?
Questions for Jason?
Is it a one-time charge?
This is a one-time charge. A lot of software nowadays is software as a service, so this is a one-time fee. Yes, sir.
One time annually or one time period?
One-time period.
This is probably more like the first year or two.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Go up. Yeah. Okay.
mhm.
Any other questions for Jason?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have presentation of request to approve additional funding for training for the treatment services employees, Treatment Service Director Jesse Emmett. Jesse. Turn it on right there. There you go.
Working now. There we go.
There
Okay.
you go.
So I'll go again to ask my request for money now that y'all can hear me loud and clear. I'm asking for $1,700, which would cover the cost of 2 registration fees for our staff to attend the National Association of Drug Court Professionals annual training. We try to send a limited number of staff every year, but it normally is in other parts of the country where requires us to, pay for hotels, flights. It's much more expensive. This year, the conference is in Nashville, and we have gotten really creative and have booked a Airbnb house where we're all going to just kind of stay together. So we are looking to really capitalize on the driving distance and the location and offer this opportunity to our staff that normally we would never be able to send them to. So we do have some money. Our complete request wasn't approved originally, so that's why we're just coming back to see if we can have this approved and send 2 additional people to the conference.
Questions for Miss Jessie?
Where are the conferences usually? Where do they take place?
Normally it's in Washington, DC, and then every other year it rotates. So next year it's going to be in Anaheim. Then I believe it goes to Houston.
Oh,
So DC is normally the closest location to us. And this is the first time in 10 years that it has been in Nashville. So
It wasn't part of requested budget.
we did ask
We
for
cut it out
some,
of
but that
budget.
was
You're
cut.
just
Yes,
coming
sir.
back now.
So we're just coming back, asking for additional funding.
Other questions?
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Next up, we have presentation of Community Oriented Policing Services COP School Safety Grant. Sheriff Johnson.
Good evening, Board. Board, I'm coming to you today to ask for approval for the SO to apply for the 2022 COPS grant. It's orientated toward school violence and school safety. It is a $500,000 grant. The county, or well, the chairman and I have had discussion about it. I've also had discussions with the school superintendent, Nicole. And unfortunately, she can't commit to it on behalf of her and the Board of Education yet, just simply due to the time. She hasn't had time to present it to them. So we did talk, the chairman and I talked about the 25% match part of it. Again, I certainly don't want to speak for her. She just can't make that decision yet. Ultimately, this grant will be used. It can be used for several different things. It again is a repeat $500,000 with a 25% match. It is a competitive grant, 36 month. We can use it for several different things. Coordination with law enforcement, training for law enforcement officers, and also can be used to harden the schools as well, from metal detectors, locks, slidings, and other deterrent measures. One thing that we've talked about is using it for bidirectional amplifier to help with our radio communications, which are sometimes non-existent in the school.
Questions for the sheriff? And just to elaborate on what the sheriff and I discussed, he had called me about this because it is, as you see, if we decide to move this forward, it'll be moved to the voting session tonight.
June 17th. Is that not tomorrow?
Tomorrow night at
16.
7:59.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
That's most grants
I
like
just
that.
checking. I've kind
So,
of mixed up on my
yeah.
days.
So we talked about this and going back to the school, because we usually have a 50-50 relationship with the school when it comes to
Yes.
school
Mhm.
resources and stuff like our officers and stuff. And so I'd ask him to check with them on this 25% match to see if they would do 12.5. And if the board so was inclined, we do, the other 12.5. Obviously, in the light of everything you've seen on the news and different things, and I know Commissioner Satterfield brought up some information, and I think they're still meeting on some of that, but
Tomorrow.
I think it's a great opportunity for us to get some money at not a very large amount of money, even if we did the whole 25%. But I think the school will be on board. I can't speak for them. Like the sheriff said, he couldn't either, but they're in the business to protect their school kids just like we are, and just like the sheriff is. So that's the discussion that he and I had.
Assume this is just come up moving it forward tonight. This is just the ability to apply
Apply.
for it. And then if you are awarded, then we would have the ability to make a further decision.
Exactly.
Correct.
Then that would give the school board enough time to
Yes. sir.
Yes,
walk through their process.
that is
What's
correct.
the odds of getting this one?
There's only 160 awards, so worth a
Nationwide.
try. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, why can't it be Dawson County?
That's what I said.
That's right. Yes, we are Dawson County. Yeah.
Other questions for the sheriff? All right, good with moving it forward?
I'm fine with
Okay,
it.
thank you,
Thank you.
Sheriff. Next up, we have presentation of radio system upgrade project for Dawson County Sheriff's Office. Chief Deputy Greg Rowan and Federal Engineering. Greg, you're going to start us, I think.
Yes, sir. Going to get it started. And it seems like as the speakers come up here, we're asking for more and more money. And
Yours is a
y'all-
little bit
yeah,
bigger, yes.
I know. Mine's going to win tonight, my presentation. Sorry. It is what it is. Okay, so, and we all know that we've been looking at replacing our radio system and upgrading it is probably a better term for quite some time now. A little bit of backstory just to catch everybody up. I remember when the chairman and I were doing this in the 80s, we shared a frequency with Cherokee County, the sheriff's office did. So you can imagine how busy it was back then in Cherokee. Wasn't too busy here, but so we've come from that point to where we are tonight, asking for a nice new modern updated system. But to kind of close it in a little bit closer to today, back in February of 2021, we came before you all about looking to hire a radio consultant, which we did. Of course, you all authorized that. The consultant was hired. We've been working quite diligently with them to obtain some facts and figures. And so basically, we're here tonight to let the radio consultant company, Mr. Brad Barber, he'll be up here in just a second, to let him give you an opportunity to ask questions, also give you some of his findings, some round figures and some other things that he will be more than happy to share with you. And this next slide here is basically just another historical perspective of that, of where we got to in 2012. So obviously 10 years ago, we did do this, we did do another system upgrade. We didn't do it completely. We've got a good percentage of it done, but we didn't finish it out. And the next slide will basically show you what we got to, what we pulled out of that modernization attempt back then. And this is what we currently have today. Basically, we have 3 sites. The one site's on Amicalola Falls. The other site here in town is off J.C. Burt Road and Highway 9. And then the third site is Lumpkin Campground, essentially at 400 there. It's called the Etowah site. So that's what we have today. We have 3 sites, technically a 4th site with the dispatch center there. And we're still using the analog radio frequency, which I'm no radio guru, but I can tell you that's the most primitive form of radio currently. With that said, we do say, and we have mentioned this before, some of the issues with coverage, and which is the reason why we're here mostly. So I won't go into all those because we've talked about those before, but you all have a general understanding that the radio coverage in this county is not the best by any shape, form, or fashion. And of course, it is very dangerous, especially in today's world. And I don't, that goes without saying, with our officers and firefighters and folks not being able to communicate back with dispatch on some occasions. And there are some, well, to give you a quick example, we had a situation this morning. They went out and did a standby essentially for an eviction. And the officer got on the radio and said, Dawson, you need to check on us about every 10 minutes. He also said, the radios don't work out here, nor do the cell phones. So it was just really a bad situation where he was at. So thankfully, everything went fine, but we do run into those situations. And the whole point of this is to try to eliminate as much as we can of those holes that we have out there in the county. So with that being said, not going into a whole lot of detail, basically we're just asking you tonight, if you will, please listen to Mr. Barber, and he will present to you basically the options. He's narrowed it, or his company has narrowed it down to 2 options. And I'll let him go into those details. So without further ado, I'm gonna bring him up and introduce him to you. And he will take over for me, and he definitely can answer just about any question you would have when it comes to this.
Thank you, Greg.
Sir.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Brad Barber. As Greg indicated, I'm with Federal Engineering. We're a national public safety communications consulting firm. Our firm's been in business since 1984, so we've been around just a little while. We've been under the same ownership, which is always a big deal these days. So here to run you through the analysis we've done for Dawson County. We started off in our normal process doing a needs assessment to figure out sort of where are we today and where do we want to get to in terms of what the radio system should provide. Building on what we found in interviewing the users of the radio system and the users at dispatch center, and actually going physically to the sites and evaluating what your current sites look like, we established that foundation so we could develop what we called a conceptual design, which looked at 2 different radio system alternatives, right? The first one was basically stay in the same frequency band, but upgrade it to Project 25, which is public safety sort of standard for public safety communications, or to look at a 700 or 800 megahertz radio system, which has some advantages in terms of frequency availability, and that spectrum is dedicated specifically for public safety, whereas VHF is not. There's a mixture of different users in the VHF band. When we look at alternatives, we always go back to the DHS interoperability continuum. To get to the highest level of day-to-day operability and interoperability, we want to get as far to the right on that chart as we can, which is basically moving to standards-based shared systems, everybody on the same technology, same frequency band, et cetera. That gets you to the highest level of interoperability. So the first alternative, as I mentioned earlier, was basically to take the sites you have today, upgrade them to P25, Project 25, Phase 2, which is the latest version of Project 25 technology. We took the 3 existing sites you have today and added 1 more site to it, 1 more radio tower site. Replace all the subscribers, put in all new base stations, new dispatch consoles, et cetera. We left in a VHF channel for interoperability and fire paging, right? So we still have that capability. And you can see on it's a little bit of an eye chart for me, but I'm hoping you guys can see it on your slide deck, where we ended up in terms of coverage comparisons to what your current system does. As you can see, the Foresight VHF P25 improves mobile coverage. That's the radios that are mounted in the vehicles, fire trucks, police cars, sheriff's office vehicles, et cetera, and for portable radios slightly. It doesn't help very much with portable in-building coverage, right? It's a pretty low number. And on that chart, we show you both what we call talk in and talk out. Talk in is from the portable or mobile radio to the tower. Talk out is from the tower out to the mobile radio or portable radio. Typically, I would only show you whatever path is the most limited, but because we were showing both for the existing system, we wanted to see what they were with the new system alternative as well. But really, whichever the more limited path is, that's what determines what real coverage you have. Because if you can't talk in or talk out, it really doesn't matter, right? Which direction, if one direction is better than the other. The other thing we did in the conceptual design, just to jump back to that for a second, is we also included a ring microwave network. So all the sites are connected in a ring configuration with microwave, not fiber, because we couldn't guarantee all the sites would have fiber available at them. If one of those microwave links were to go down, the traffic would go in the opposite direction. So we don't ever lose total communication for the whole radio system. Alternative 2 is very similar to alternative 1. We're just doing it at a different frequency band. We're moving to the 700-800 megahertz band. We're still leveraging as many of your sites as we can that you have today, because we're trying to avoid building a greenfield site if we can. Greenfield sites take much longer to develop because we've got to go through the whole zoning, permitting process, et cetera. You've got to build a structure, et cetera, right? If we can build, or if we can go where we already have towers or assets, we prefer to do that first. There's also obviously some cost savings associated with taking that approach as well. As you can see, we're also adding 2 sites, that configuration in 700 or 800, right? We're putting in or adding 2 sites that are actually in Forsyth County, one near the old landfill on Federal Highway, and the other one, which is an existing Forsyth County site in Molly View. This will give you sort of a graphic idea of what the differences are in coverage between the 2 alternatives. Everything that's in blue is a mobile radio coverage. Everything that's in yellow is portable radio coverage outside. And anything in green is portable in building. And that's a light building like a home, small office complex, something like that. Okay. And you can see the difference in building coverage between the 2 alternatives is pretty drastic, pretty significant. 700-800 with the site configuration that we did in the conceptual design will provide much more in-building coverage and portable outdoor coverage than alternative 1 would in VHF. Granted, though, we're also adding 2 sites to that 700-800 design. You can also see on that chart which sites are existing. They're color coded. If you can see the legend at the bottom, the yellow sites would be greenfield sites, the little yellow crosses. And then the blue or the orange site was the one site that Forsyth already owns. So what are some of the key considerations between, was there a question? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Some of the key considerations between the 2 alternatives are, you could take either one of these approaches and implement them as a standalone system where the county owns, operates all the equipment and pays for all of it, right? You could also look at sharing opportunities, okay? Where an adjacent county might already have a control network or control center that you could connect to and reduce some of your costs, right? In this area, the primary alternatives for that would probably be Cobb County, which has a regional system, which Forsyth is part of. Or you could partner with Hall County as another example, or even a county that's further away, right? Habersham County is implementing a P25 system today. So you could partner with one of those entities to try to share their control network to reduce some of your costs. The disadvantage of doing that is that you're also locked into the same upgrade plan and support plan that they're on. Okay. So if they decide they're going to upgrade their network, you'd also have to upgrade your network at the same time. So you have to make sure you have a funding plan to support that. That's what you're going to do. The other advantage to doing a sharing is you could share some coverage, right? So if you were to join with Forsyth, for example, they have some sites that we're trying to reuse. So there's some opportunities there to leverage some coverage off of their system as well. So there's some cost sharing opportunities there as well. There's 6 counties that surround you. It's sort of evenly split. 3 of them are VHF today, and 3 of them are 700 or 800. So it's half and half. All of the P25 systems that are adjacent to you are all in the 700 or 800 megahertz frequency band. So if you want to leverage that opportunity, you're more than likely going to end up on 700-800 if you're going to move to P25 and look for those cost sharing opportunities. So some of the things that we run into from a deployment perspective that make the alternatives different are challenges that we'll run into. VHF is a very difficult band to deploy new systems in. It's very difficult for us to find new frequencies. It was difficult for you to find frequencies when you did this back in 2012. Right? That problem hasn't gotten any better. In fact, it's probably gotten worse. The other problem we have in VHF is it's much more prone to what we call environmental noise impacts. Environmental noise is all sorts of man-made noise, can come from lighting and thermostats in buildings. Now they're all smart devices, all sorts of things like that that increase the noise floor and create a bar or a wall that the radio signal has to get through to get to the end users, right? We do not expect that problem to get any better in VHF. We expect it to get worse, okay? So we've been doing this a lot lately for clients. Say, okay, well, I know what my coverage is today. Tell me what it's going to be 10 years from now in VHF. And what we have to do for them is derate what we think the coverage will be because of that environmental noise condition, right? So your coverage in VHF might be adequate today, but I can't guarantee you it's going to be adequate 10 years from now because of that environmental noise factor. The one advantage to staying in the same frequency band is it makes some of the transition a little bit easier because you're already in VHF. We don't have to necessarily swap everything out at the same time, et cetera. But that also makes it more difficult because it's unlikely we're going to be able to find new frequencies. So we'll probably have to take channels away from your existing system to bring up the new system if we stay in VHF, which creates an operational issue, excuse me, as your users start to migrate. You're already sort of capacity constrained now because a very limited number of channels to operate on today. And that's one of the reasons we're even talking about this. So that would make that transition even more difficult. Some of the advantages in alternative 2, moving to that 700, 800 megahertz frequency band, it's much easier to get new channels. The channels that are in that spectrum is a whole bank of them dedicated strictly for public safety. There's nobody else except public safety that operates in that part of that band. It's designed to be used in these types of systems, and it's sort of managed so that you don't have the interference issues that you have at VHF. We're also not as impacted by environmental noise in the higher frequency band, so we won't have the man-made noise factors, as many of those to worry about in the 700 or 800 megahertz frequency band. The transition is a little more difficult because we're going to build the new stuff and then transition people over. So that's a little bit of a catch-22 there. But we've managed that transition successfully for many agencies across the nation. The one drawback is from a mobile perspective, it takes a few more sites in 700-800 to provide the same level of mobile coverage, but your in-building penetration is going to be much better in 700-800 than it's going to be in VHF just because of the way the spectrum works. So there's the big ticket numbers, just the kind of side-by-side comparison of the 2 alternatives, right? So we use 2 more sites in the 700, 800 alternative 2. You get a little bit better coverage in alternative 2. We don't have some of the risks that we talked about earlier in alternative 1 with alternative 2. And you have more opportunities for cost sharing with alternative 2, which is good because it also costs more because we have to add 2 more sites in order to make it work. The numbers I'm showing you here are round order of magnitude numbers because I can't guarantee you, what that cost is going to be until you actually start moving forward with the process, right? As I'm sure you guys are all aware, there's a lot of volatility in the markets today. Inflation's up, costs are up overall. Some of the issues we've been running into on the radio side of the business is steel prices are higher, labor prices are higher, right? There isn't anything that's been less in the last 6 months to a year. So one of the questions we talked about is that, is it likely that these prices would go down as inflation starts to maybe perhaps get under a little bit more control? I would not expect to see that, right? In the 36 years I've been doing this, I've never seen the cost of radio systems go down. Okay. So it would not be a fair expectation to think that they're going to go down. If you were to wait, that it might be less money later. The support costs overall, what we do is we give you a life cycle support cost. That's what you would expect to pay for O&M cost over the 10-year period that we typically price this out at. They're relatively close. I know probably 500,000 doesn't sound like relatively close, but it's close in our world. And that does include, recurring upgrades to keep your system current, so that you don't get in a position where if you needed to add another site or add some more dispatch consoles later, you would not be able to do that. So that's the sort of side-by-side comparison of the two alternatives. Any questions at this point?
Questions for Brad?
Obviously, technology changes on a rapid base, almost more rapidly today than yesterday. What is the anticipated, use the number 10 years for a life cycle? However, I'll assume that potentially it could go beyond that just because we've been on our system for 30 plus years, I guess.
Right.
So what are we to take away as far as the potential lifespan of the system?
It's a great question. The P25 standard is a user-driven standard. It's one of the exceptions sort of in the market. That whole standard has been driven by public safety. So it's not static. It continues to evolve, right? We started out P25 phase 1, we moved to P25 phase 2. We continue to add capabilities to P25 technology. So I don't anticipate that technology is going to go away in the 15 to 20 sort of year timeframe, right? It will continue to improve and have enhancements added to it, but don't expect it to go away. There's been a lot of talk in my market about, well, could things like, FirstNet or push to talk over cellular ever replace public safety radio? And we're advising our clients, we don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. I heard somebody say this at a conference in Las Vegas, an international wireless conference, where we don't expect push to talk over cellular to replace public safety radio. We expect it to augment it, right? And that is one of the options you can look at as part of this system that we're proposing, is we could actually use some push to talk over cellular technology that's tied to your radio system to have alternative approaches for people like public works, right? They could have a cell phone basically that's connected to the radio system and be able to talk to the sheriff's office deputy. Okay, so that's another option that we built into the standard, if you will. So I don't think you're investing in a technology that has a horizon, right? It's going to continue to evolve over time, as it has for the last 25 plus years. So I talked about some of the cost sharing considerations briefly earlier. You do have the opportunity, if you go 7-800 P25 alternative to share a network control center with another entity. Say you were to join the Cobb County regional system, they would own the control center. You would have to expand it to support Dawson County's radio sites, but you would just be expanding theirs rather than buying a whole new one. Okay, that cost savings could be as much as $500,000 to do that. Okay, so it's significant. The drawback, as I mentioned earlier, is that if you do that, you're on the same upgrade cycle as Cobb County is, right? So if Cobb County decides next year they're going to upgrade, then you also have to be ready to upgrade with them. Okay, they don't typically happen that often. Usually in that 2 to 4 year sort of window when these upgrades typically occur, but you do have to factor that into your life cycle support plan. Obviously, if you're going to partner with another entity, whether it's Forsyth or Hall or Habersham or Cobb, you have to have some sort of interlocal governance agreement set up to cover that, determine who's going to pay what kind of representation you're going to have in terms of management of the system, et cetera. All those things can be managed, but it's something you have to consider when you're going through this process.
So Brad, even if we wind up talking the standalone system, and we go 700, 800 megahertz, we still gonna have an intergovernmental agreement in reference to these tower sites that are in Forsyth County and the one tower site that's actually in Pickens County.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. The other factor that you have to think about if you're going to partner with someone else is that your design for your system has to be done in partnership with that other entity, right? You got to make sure that what you're planning to deploy is going to work with whatever core network hardware they have as well. So you got to do that in hand in hand, sort of. We can also share radio tower sites, right? And for sites is one of those examples where we can, not have some of the costs that would be part of building a new site. We'd actually share that cost. That site on Old Federal Highway is a site that for sites is actually in the very beginning processes of building. They're planning to put a 300-foot tower there. They haven't done any of the building and engineering for that yet. So if we got in early enough, we could partner with them to help them build that site and reduce some of the costs associated with that site build. So that's another opportunity. That can save you a lot of money and also eliminates a lot of development time. If you got two governmental entities that are trying to do something together, it sort of greases the skids a little bit in trying to get a site built as well. Same issue, you still got to have interlocal cost sharing agreement. Same issue in terms of what are you going to do on the towers. You got to share your design with your partners, the people you're trying to do something with, to make sure that you're all playing from the same playbook. Any questions on the cost sharing side of that?
Not particularly on that, but you bring up a question. You said that Cobb County potentially would be if it's a partnership, they average a 2 to 4 year upgrade schedule.
That's just the market in general. It's not just Cobb.
Okay, so based on that, is the numbers that you gave us, is that estimated support cost, does that bake in the upgrades that we
It
would have to
does.
do? Okay,
It does. Yeah, when we do the 10-year life cycle costs, we always include that life cycle upgrade.
okay.
Because in my mind, and you can look at numerous DSA guidance and say the same thing, you've got to, once you get on that technology treadmill, you can't get off of it, right? You got to stay up to date in order to keep your systems operating. And, with the growth you guys are having here, I would expect you're going to have to expand the system at some point, right? So you need to be in that upgrade path in order to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, the 2 to 4 year thing, that is not just Cobb. That's sort of kind of industry standard, right? You're usually trying to keep upgrading that 2 or 4 year life cycle. And that's primarily coming from the vendors, right? Because the vendors, they can only go backward compatible so far, right? It's like your computers, right? You can only keep that computer for running for so long before you have to replace it or change the operating system.
So we may see, just further clarification, when you've got it spelled out, the estimated support cost is 10 years, or that's on the option 2. If we just go straight to that, that's 2.4 million over 10 years, which would be $240,000 a year. That can ebb and flow. So 1 year it might be at 100,000, then we have to do an upgrade in 3 years, and it would be a larger amount, or is that spread out equally?
What we typically spread out equally, right? You decide what your life cycle support plan is going to be. Do you want to be on a 2-year cycle or a 4-year cycle? And they usually do those agreements for 7 to 10 years.
Okay.
So that's a fixed cost that we would build into the procurement to say, hey, tell us what the cost is going to be for each year 3 through 10. One of the things I didn't mention is what we also do in our standard procurement specifications. We say, we want a 3-year warranty for everything from the get-go, right? First 3 years, everything's covered under warranty because you want to get out of the deployment implementation phase before your support costs kick in, right? So that covers the subscribers, the infrastructure, all the base stations, consoles, et cetera. So your actual support O&M costs don't kick in until year 4.
So it's just to make
So
sure.
it's
I got
really
these numbers
6
right.
years.
So it's
of
6, so
O&M
it's
costs.
2.4 divided by 6, not 2.4
Correct.
divided by 5. Okay.
Correct. So I know I kind of took questions as we were going, but just to kind of wrap things up, from our perspective, once the county decides which direction you want to go in, we would assist you in developing a functional specification for whichever alternative you want to pursue, right? I would suggest that when we do that, we build that functional specification to support a standalone system as the primary with an alternative proposal or an alternate proposal that says, if you have a cost sharing proposal you want to present to the county, you could do that as well, right? But you still have to submit the standalone proposal to do the alternate proposal, which would include sharing someone else's network, okay? You can see both costs that way, and you'll have more solid information to base your final decision on. Okay. All right, any other questions for me?
Questions for Brad?
With the standalone system, the way that you've got it kind of configured here, we would still be using a tower, 2 towers or 3 towers that's another county owns, is that correct?
Well, you would, it's a little bit of both, right? So Monument Road's a greenfield, so you could own that site, or at least the tower,
Yeah.
right? We still have to figure out, who owns that land and how that's going to be procured or transferred or whatever. The federal highway, if you partnered with Forsyth, you'd both own it, right? If you decided to go that route. Or Forsyth could build it and you could work out some sort of sharing agreement with them to make that tower stronger to support your stuff, okay? Which wouldn't be the cost of building a whole new tower, it'd be whatever the incremental cost is to make it suitable for your use. We suspect that on the Molly View site, and I talked to the EMA administrator down there this morning, that site could probably support your equipment, that we're having the conceptual design without significant modifications, but we'd still have to do a structural to confirm that. So we think that site is probably ready to go. They believe there's enough room in the compound to add a building for you guys, et cetera. So all that looks promising at this point.
So the numbers that you provided are based on those facts, right? That we would possibly be able to partner with Forsyth and use these other towers? Is that,
We know, because we wanted to show you worst case scenario.
okay, that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So
So
if
we wanted
we-
to show you the worst case.
Right, okay,
We assumed you'd have to build your own tower at Federal Highway.
okay. And the numbers that you provided, you're assuming that we're gonna have to go in all alone at all 6 of these sites and do what we need to do. to
Except
make
for
them-
Molly View, right? 'Cause
Except for
that's an
Molly.
existing tower,
Okay,
right? So we did say you got to have, all the other things, structural analysis and put new
Right.
antennas up and all that kind of stuff. Yes.
okay.
Tower approximately $1 million.
It depends. I know that's great because
like an attorney.
consultants always. I get that a lot. So, it depends on what type of tower it is. There's a big difference between a self-supported tower cost and a guide tower cost. And the property determines what you can do there, right? A guide tower is cheaper, but it takes more real estate. Self-supported tower doesn't take as much real estate, but it's more expensive. So, it just depends on what can we do at that particular site. So sorry, I couldn't give you a direct answer, but there are numbers in our cost estimates we could share with you. I just don't know them off the top of my head. So
Was any cell towers available that would support that system on
it's a
them?
little
Or
bit.
location not available?
Yeah,
just
it's a
location.
little bit of it's trade-off, right? For the most part, the cell carriers aren't looking for high towers. They're looking for low towers now, right? They'll build sites because they're handing traffic off, right? And they're doing that on purpose. They want it to work that way. In a public safety radio system, we want all the towers to transmit the same information at the same time. Okay, so everybody hears it, no matter where they're at. And those towers, to get maximum bang for the buck, tend to be much taller than cellular towers do. That's not to say we can't use a cellular tower. We've done that in lots of different projects, but it's variable. It depends.
'Cause I think we've got something in our tower ordinance that we have the capability of tying on to them
We do.
Yeah.
If,
at no cost. Or costs we'd have to put in
Yeah.
the building or the equipment.
yeah, we'd have to
And
make-
the
upgrade.
structure would have to support it.
yeah, we'd have to make the upgrades, yeah.
I mean, oftentimes what happens, and I run into this a lot with the cell carriers, is they'll say, okay, well, tell us what you want to put on it, then we'll tell you whether it'll work or not. Right? And there's usually a cost associated with that process, right? So there's an application and a structural analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So we can model it from a coverage perspective and see if that site makes more sense than another site though, and kind of give you an idea where that site might work.
Other questions for Brad? A lot of good information, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Appreciate it. And I enjoy being up here and getting to work with you guys. It's been a good experience for us as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have presentation. Not that we know how much it's gonna cost.
That's not part of the.
It did say something about set the budget. Yeah. It did. Yeah.
Well, we can do that when we vote, as far as setting the budget for it. That's gonna be a hard thing to do with unknown. Because at a maximum, I guess, if that's what you desire to do when you decide to vote on picking a alternative 1 or 2. All right, next up, we have presentation request to release a design build RFP for an emergency 911/emergency operations center building. County Manager David Headley. David.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. The citizens of Dawson County voted to pass a SPLOST 7 on March 16th, 2021. And this SPLOST holds a level 2 countywide project, which is the new Emergency Operations Center / E911 building and radio system upgrade with a combined $8.5 million budget. The portions of the SPLOST 7 designated towards the center is $5.5 million, which have been collected to date. The Mill Creek Environmental completed a desktop review and issued a site health and safety plan stating that the county would be at the moderate risk in developing the old facilities and fleet building site down on State Road 53. No issues were found during the testing to preclude the site from use for the E911 center or the EOC building. As you know, we're also considering that site as the new health department as well. So the entire site has had a limited subsurface investigation done. And so the whole site is clean to a moderate condition. So Mill Creek Environmental did complete the LSI on the former maintenance fleet building property included, but not limited to, completed 4 soil borings. We did 2 soil samplings per boring, and then assessed the soil and groundwater conditions. The borings was drilled to a depth of 30 feet below the ground surface. The LSI experienced the same result as the desktop review. The county would be at a moderate risk in developing the old facilities and fleet building site. So what's next? The emergency services and the sheriff's office staff have visited a few sites that near the needs of the county, but with different layouts for comparison. Each department have compiled a layout of the respective floors and a list of needed equipment. Received permission from the BOC to release an RFP, request for price, for the design build of the facilities and budget for the project. You will see the EOC design plan, which is just a schematic. It's not to an architectural standard. And then it has a list of the furniture that you'll see. Office furniture, student desks and monitoring chairs, interactive whiteboards, TV monitors, and kitchen break room and furniture, supplies, and copier. The next slide is at the E91 design plan. And again, just a schematic drawing. Once we get the RFP in and design a scope of work, we'll then be able to get more precise on how that building is going to lay out. And then the E91 draft contents list there as well. So staff is recommending that the respectfully request that the board to approve for purchasing to release an RFP to design build an E911 / EOC building using SPLOST 7 funds. Answer any questions you may have on that.
Couple of questions in reference to the design. Looking at the both of the schematics, I mean, I know they're not to scale, but with the limited funding that we have, like I know the EOC will be used for an operational center during times of disaster, but it could also be used for training and other things.
Yes, sir.
During those non-times. So we want to make sure that we're incorporating those kind of situations where we don't have double. In other words, a meeting room and an EOC and all that stuff. So when we're looking at this design, let's try to make sure that we incorporate, all of those things singularly so that we can save money, because just because we zed $5.5 million, I wouldn't have a whole bad, a hard heartburn if we had a few dollars of that left to go to the radio project. So I don't think anybody on the board would either. So let's take a serious look at what we can do. We want to build a building that's going to be good for multiple years. We also don't want to go way out above and beyond in reference to what we're looking to do. So let's be realistic in our approach to this design.
Yes, sir.
And so I'd like for personally, I'd like for the board to see that design up front so that we get some kind of preliminary cost estimate. So it's not be looking at a 15,000 square foot building that we can't afford. So let's don't waste a whole lot of money designing something that's going to be out of the range of what we can actually do.
Are these potentially a two-story building or one-story or what's?
It's potential two-story.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Looks like one plan, there's two different plans on here from what I'm seeing, the EOC design plan, and then you got another 911 design plan, but it's got the EOC in it as well. I don't know if that's what the chairman's referring to, duplication of space. Is that-
Above the other one.
Yeah, one of them's above you. But just want to make sure that we're using the space wisely, because I know we've got classroom and we also have EOC. So let's make sure that we are making that a singular project, because obviously during emergency times, it'll be an EOC. It could also be used for a classroom.
And we'll be looking at that in more detail and also putting a scope of work together before we go out
Okay.
to bid that out and get the RFP active.
Any other questions for David?
How many acres is there? How many acres do they end up?
It's a little
being?
over 4 acres.
1.4, wasn't it? Dan?
Yes, sir. Something like that.
4.4.
What's the definition between, you mentioned the Mill Creek did a risk assessment and you've got moderate. What is moderate versus low versus high? I mean, what does that play? in?
Moderate
And
being that,
what's the
looking at,
risk?
they look at the historic condition of that, as you know, that old, used to be an old fleet shop, used to be a road department shop as well. And that means that there could be, based on, they did some soil borings, but they may have, missed some area. Depending on when you get in, you may find a spot. So there is, based on the character and the history of that site, there could be, some contaminant there that might have to be removed, might be some unsuitable soils or something along that line. So they're just kind of basically saying that could be some
Chance.
moderate risk on
It
that.
could be a risk anywhere.
Yeah, anyway.
Yes,
Any
sir.
piece of property you get.
I mean, when we
Not-
did
you're not
Carlisle
boring a
Road,
whole
we did
piece of
a
property.
50-foot wide grid and a vein ran right between the 50-foot mark. And so that had to be taken out, but it does happen.
But what is the risk? If it,
Contaminated soil.
Contaminated
It'll have to
soil.
be removed.
And
oh, just
and
have, okay.
We just have to
when you
be
would
removed.
bid that out, as far as your site work, the contractor may come back and give you an unsuitable soil
Okay.
quantity price for unsuitables in case you run into it, just knowing that there was gasoline or petroleum
Uh-huh.
products or, those kind of things that were on that site before. And there might be something buried that may have been deeper than the 30 feet or something that they looked at. So,
But you,
It's just-
but we would be responsible for moving that.
yes, ma'am.
But I think since we already own the property, we're already responsible for it
That's
Exactly.
anyway. So if we were buying it, it would probably be a little more concerned, but since we already own the property, if there's something there, it's their responsibility anyway. So.
Yep. Other questions for David?
Who drew the plans?
Pardon me?
Who drew the plans?
I'll leave that to Greg Rowan and Chief Thompson.
Y'all
Now, I see a lot of finger
Everybody's
pointing
pointing at each other.
like this.
He drew it.
I was about to say my 9-year-old, but I'm not gonna.
That's the reason the
Yeah.
county manager said, this is not the scale.
That's not the scale. This is not an architectural drawing. This is just a concept schematic. But I believe certain sites that they have seen in the past that they've compiled information on and are looking at what they need in there. And to the chairman's point, we'll fine tune that as we go along, making sure we're not duplicating.
But I mean, to Billy's point, I mean, you're not. How are you coming up with the design that you want to be bid upon? I mean, how are you narrowing that down so it fits
True.
within a budget?
It's a design bill. I mean, they're gonna come back and it's gonna have to be tweaked. They'll bring us one layout. Architect gonna get a hold of it and draw it, conceptual drawing. He's not gonna put a lot of time and effort for the mechanicals, electricals, all that heat in there and all that, but he's gonna give a floor plan. Then comes back to staff and they said, now we need to tweak it or
So
adjusted
it's a
here and there.
moving process.
Moving process,
Right.
yeah.
Then after that would come before you all, or prior to that would go to you all to take a look at. See what we have.
Other questions for David? Thanks, Dave. Right, next up, we have presentation request for Public Works Special Projects Coordinator position, County Manager David Headley. David.
Yes, sir. And we're kind of circling back here again on this project manager slash MS4 position. Christie, HR Director, and myself got together and kind of tweaked it a little bit to kind of look at what we can and can't do. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that in any of the departments that we have vacancies and it's hard to fill those vacancies. And so we have to be creative in what we're doing and look at some revising of positions. And so this happens to be one of them. As you know, in your packet, I did provide you a stormwater MS4 inspector, a new position, which kind of outlined the 6 categories that would be required of that MS4 coordinator. We also have the existing position that we have now is a project management position. And that project management position handles a lot of your, capital projects, your road projects, those type of things, as you know, and I'll just use Brian as an example, Mr. Young, when we did the senior center, he was acting as project manager on that. So it's both vertical and horizontal construction that individual would be working on. So when we built this courthouse, for example, the project manager on that was funded through SPLOS and was just that, specifically for the courthouse. So what I wanted to do was to combine those 2 services and come up with one position, which is revising the existing project manager position and making that a special projects coordinator position, with stipulations in there that individual would have to get the certifications, for the MS4 program that is provided by the state. And then be able to work both that project management and the MS4 together. So that requires a grade change and requires an increase in the salary. So that obviously has to come before you all and be approved by the commission. So that's what I'm asking for now, is to be able to re-advertise this position as a special projects coordinator position with, and I provided you also with the job summary, which is basically taking the engineering component out of it and making it a broader experience. Somebody that may have more horizontal experience, but doesn't really have that, that stormwater management, which can be, trained and taught and also, and would be required to get that certification within a certain period of time. So that's what I'm here to ask today, is that if the board would consider going ahead and modifying that position to a special projects coordinator and making that change, and then re-advertising the position.
Questions for David?
Your research, is it the proposed salary, is that going to put us in a competitive position to attract somebody for that role, you think?
I think it will. Again, I think before, when we were looking at putting it under the engineering umbrella and looking more at it as a PE, licensed PE, professional engineer, we're not really designing it. We're actually collecting data and reporting that to the state and doing educational program, those kind of things. So that component really fit more a while back when we were doing our own internal design, so to speak, because we needed somebody that could seal drawings, that type of thing. So revisiting that job description and then looking at what we have now, hopeful that change will help.
And that's something that we obviously can look at if we don't get qualified applicants. And as David said, we do have the option to increase that salary even through SPLOST, because a couple of those projects are going to be fully splosh funded. So during those phases of when we're building the EOC 911 center and the health department, there could be funding from that pays for however many hours that person is to, even to increase that salary for them to manage those two big projects. And then, of course, obviously that could go away when those projects are done. And so we do have some options there. I personally think it's low, that we'll be lucky to find somebody for what we're offering. That's just my personal opinion. And I've done a little bit of research looking online at some of these project managers and MS4 people. And there's a whole lot of need for those kind of people. And there's a whole lot of money being spent on some of those people. So as David said, we may be able to find somebody that we kind of train into the position at this particular salary, but holding that person, once they get trained, will be like a lot of the other positions you've seen go on through here. So we need to be thinking about that as time goes forward. But somebody that's already qualified to do it, no, there's no chance that we're going to get.
Well, and I think we saw that in the bid that we got. We got one bid.
Yeah.
And that was, for $150,000 roughly. And that,
And that's something
it.
else that you're gonna have to keep in mind as a board is those documents and stuff still have got to be sent in, and they got to be sent on time. So as this training process folds out, you're gonna spend money making sure that documentation through the private company that we're using now. So there's going to be that cost associated with that as well. So, but it's
What
worth,
salaries did you see, Billy?
anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000. And that's just for each individual one of those. And there's tons of openings for these type of people who have the capability of getting this done. That have the experience and the know-how. Like David said, a lot of those people are engineers too. But, when you're talking about a project manager who has got to be able to go out to the roadside and they're looking at drainage and they're looking at all that stuff. Now, that's not just some Johnny come lately that can do that and do it right. And so, we can hopefully get there, but as a board, you're going to have to be prepared to do something once you get that person qualified. Because let me tell you, they can walk the next day once they become qualified to do it, and they will, and they'll get bigger money. So we need to keep that in mind. Any other questions for David? And David, you wanted to move this forward, didn't you?
pardon me?
You wanted to move this forward tonight
I would like to. the
Okay.
board
so you could
consider that.
advertise it.
Thank you.
Y'all good with moving it forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Thanks, David. Next up, we have presentation request for funding to purchase the ESO fire reporting software, Emergency Service Director Danny Thompson. Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Come before you tonight to request a software program update, kind of a little back history on this. Dawson County Fire and EMS uses a software program currently called Firehouse, and we've done so for well over a decade. Over the years, this program has experienced numerous upgrades. The current version that we use is a web-based version system. ESO purchased the rights to Firehouse software back in 2021. During that time, they let all the current clients know that they would stop servicing the software program once a suitable replacement was actually designed. We actually didn't get notification until December of 21 what the new program would be. We were not able to actually ask for it in budget because we just didn't know what type of version would be coming out, and budget hearings had already closed at that moment. ESO designed a new web-based version that meets the requirement of what's commonly referred to as NFRS, and that's the National Fire Reporting System. So we're a current user of ESO. We use that for our patient care reporting system. We're looking to stay with ESO as a sole vendor, not only for our PCR portion, but also to move forward with the NFRS, asset inventory, truck maintenance, inspections, pre-plans, our arson investigation documentation, and also to migrate over to fire and EMS online training for our personnel. The cost to upgrade for total annually would be $37,434.05. Obviously, we will be asking for that portion again in the FY '23. But what we need to be able to begin the changeover in the migration process for this year of all of our current data is $22,202.68. And that will enable us to go ahead and begin that transition this year. That transition will take approximately 90 days, at which point ESO will come in and they will also train all of our personnel. We've had an opportunity to look at the ESO back in the early, or should I say late winter, early spring. They gave us a demo version that we were able to go in. It's pretty user friendly. It's very consistent with what we're currently using. There's just a few new fields that some of our personnel will need to get used to. One of the reasons why we have made the decision to kind of stick with ESO is some of that migration. We've reached out to IT, we consulted with them. There are some other vendors where we could have saved a few $1,000s here and there. The problem was they could not guarantee migration of data. So we may be left rebuilding our database for pre-fire plans. We may be left rebuilding our database for hydrant maintenance. And so we just looking at that, just the savings wasn't there to really support it. So kind of recapping a little bit of what we're actually requesting today is for the board to approve in our budget an additional $22,202.68. Again, this software program will encompass the NIFRS reporting, which is mandatory. It'll also have an equipment asset control component, an apparatus inventory component, fire inspections component, pre-plans, arson investigation, fire hydrant maintenance, hose records. This platform will also have our own fire and EMS training. We have routinely for years used a platform called Moodle. And that is owned and operated by Hall County. So we've been at their mercy, and the training has been more specific for them, not necessarily us. So we will be able to develop this training program that's really specific to meet Dawson County's needs and not another county's needs. And again, we've worked with procurement to make sure that the contract portions of all this are in place. I'll answer any questions that the board may have.
Questions for Chief Thompson?
So annual moving forward cost is $37,434.05. More or total? Like we have a current cost, I assume now for our current.
Yes, so currently we're paying roughly $7,119.13. Okay, so that's what we pay right now. So that's going to go away. That's going to be built into
30
that.
grand,
So
basically.
essentially, it's an additional 30 grand
Annually.
annually.
Moving forward.
Yes, moving forward.
The rest of our
So as
lives.
the rest of your life,
Well, you know it's
forever and
gonna
ever.
go up.
Not near as
What are
much
we
as the
paying
radio
Hall-
system.
What are we paying Hall County?
We pay Hall County based on the number of users. So we've kind of, if you trip that 100, then you pay another $500 fee. So if you got 99 employees, you pay 1,000. If you have 101, you pay 1,500
A month, a year?
annual.
We're down to 29. Other questions for Chief Thompson? Got to keep it going. That's the way it is.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I got
Go ahead, go ahead.
one other question. Whatever happened to the program the state was going to put on?
So that is Image Trend.
Did that ever
That is
come
a,
out?
it's out. We looked at it. It's basic. If you add any of the modules, inspections, you pay for that.
It was free, the program.
Just the NIFRS reporting,
The basic.
nothing else. And then
I knew they were
again,
working on
Image
something.
Trend can't guarantee migration of the data to 100%. So then Chief Bailey and his staff will be left rebuilding all of the pre-plans and all of that portion.
They can do that.
He's got that in the bag.
He's got it figured out. Yeah. He's shaking his head. So he agrees.
He's super excited about that.
Oh, yeah. Other questions for Chief Thompson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, we have presentation request for title and grade change for planning and development administrative assistant, planning and development director Sharon Farrell. Sharon.
Good evening. Back up here, really two requests from you. One is the business license technician, which is fairly dated title and job that goes back to when it started in 1906. Part-time position at a, over the years became full-time and a lot more complicated and a lot more responsibility. It really wasn't, nobody took a really deep dive back when they did the job study to take a look at really what this position does. So I'm presenting basically a new job description and a new pay grade. I worked with HR, who was happy to see this happen. It's been on her radar for a while, and we hope to move forward with it.
That's the business.
That's the business license technician,
And so that pay
to-
grade currently is
an 8.
8 and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was
It goes way
part-time at one
back.
time, so it'd be going to a
16
16,
and
okay.
change the title to.
development service representative. two.
Yes, and that also a title change for the zoning administrator, because what I've done is I've combined. Basically, you do one or the other, but it's still a similar degree of difficulty. You're either focusing on business license or focusing on public hearings, but those two kind of work tag team so that if one or the other was out of the office, you wouldn't have the, well, she's not here today, or he's not here today.
Okay.
You'll have to come back.
The other upgrade is,
Is this the job that Margaret does now?
She did about 2 weeks ago. She was promoted. So she is working with permit technician. A permit
Margaret,
technician.
I thought she
Margaret.
was trying to retire.
Well, I
We
won't
won't
let
let
her.
her.
She keeps threatening, but yeah, it depends on the day.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't let her go.
So,
so,
so
uh,
what's she doing now?
She is training and doing, she's still working, doing the business license issuance,
Okay,
but her official title is permit specialist. And she was promoted and basically so I could work on the job description and get somebody in that she can train before she does retire. So she's graciously sticking around to train her replacement.
and some of these are vacant, correct?
Yes, yes, the admin assistant will be vacant as of tomorrow night. And that's going to change to development services office manager.
Okay. Now it's going from 11 to a 17.
Yes.
That's the request. Okay. It is definitely a changing time when people are having to do more. And so we've got to keep up with those times as well. And that is the reason you see Miss Sharon here today, is so that we don't have vacant. We got to make sure that we can keep up with that. So that's what you will be looking at, and she would like to move those forward, correct?
Please.
To tonight, if y'all are willing to do that. Y'all willing to move those forward, or y'all want to think about it?
like that a little bit. I'm not sure I completely get all this,
Read through all the material some more.
but I mean, if everybody else wants to, I can always abstain.
What do y'all want to do?
I'm okay to move.
I'm fine with that if we need to. We don't.
What about Chris? What do you think?
I'm desperate, are you, to get it moved forward? I mean, you need it done.
Yeah, yeah, and we need to fill the positions, get training, we have new software that we kicked off a couple of weeks ago. And
I
we
know
are
your department is a very busy. department.
very busy, very busy.
And a very volatile changing department. I just have to say that. There's a lot goes on in that. department.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, we cover, I wasn't sure what that meant.
What did you
We
think I
cover-
said?
I wasn't sure. I wasn't
Did
sure.
it sound like I was cussing? Well, it probably will blow up. There's a lot
We
goes
do.
on in there.
We cover a lot of disciplines, yes.
You do, you do. So, all right, let's go over this. We're
Okay.
changing what to what?
We have
let's-
one position that's been around for years. It started as part-time, and that's. the
And that's
business-
where Margaret was.
Right, correct. Business license technician, just a title change and a grade change to development services. And development services two, because when I want to create it, when I desire to create is a level 1 and 2 in those job descriptions. Level 1 is you first start with us, you get some basic certifications, soil erosion and some training. And then if there's an opening, in the future as we grow, the development services 2 would be somebody with more experience, more certifications that can deal with the Georgia Administrative Code and some of the more complex issues that we deal with.
So this
that's-
person is gonna be doing more than issue and business
Correct.
license.
Well, and I have to be honest with you, there is a lot of information and a lot of research now to issue a business license. When somebody says even something as simple as a tenant change, you still have to look all the background, the zoning, the parking. There's a lot now, even in a small community, state law, local law, licensing, tattoo parlors. It's just become very complex. And I
But
like
like me, when you just don't ever change and you keep coming, you can issue it just like that.
that doesn't happen, but
Well,
twice
it
a year.
happens to me.
Yeah, yeah.
It happens to me because I
So,
I don't change. I'm dinosaur.
Well, right, so it has become complex in all, anything in like has to do with land use. You have to be so careful and trained, to keep us out of lawsuits. And also the title change is just also timing to, we're more into a development services mode than zoning and planning.
So what are we calling it? I thought you said it's a permit specialist. What are we calling it?
It's going to be a development specialist, a development service. Yeah, sorry, development services. There's a 1 and a 2.
We need to do a budget amendment because these are increasing
No.
allocated budget items.
No, because the one position is vacant. And it's not a new position. It's and the other position, the person leaving is at a high enough pay grade currently that it's in the budget, and we are mid-year.
Okay.
You have that money in your budget for right now.
Yeah.
It would change next year, obviously. You have that for this
Yes.
year. Okay.
All right, what's the name of the other position?
There's a blue chart.
Administrative assistant going to development
Is this
services
Diane's
office manager.
position?
The office manager.
The administrative assistant.
Yes, yes.
Okay, now I can zero in on that. Okay,
Okay.
all right.
And again, just a dated title, an administrative assistant can range, depends how complicated the discipline is for the office.
And it's called an office manager now.
It will be
Development services
formally,
office manager.
yeah, formally called.
Gosh, we're all in development services, aren't we?
That's what we do.
Well, they do a lot of services. I mean, that's
You know
why
they do.
there's a lot of people that go in that office.
Oh, I know that. We're probably way behind the 8 ball on this. Probably should have done this a long time ago.
It's a possibility, yes. All right, so any other questions for Ms. Sharon? It does appear that we got enough people saying yes to move it forward, so we'll move both of those forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next up, we have presentation of request for title and grade change for planning and development presentation request for a proposed agreement regarding exchange of right-of-way or interest in land related to the county's State Route 53 at Thompson Creek Park Road realignment project. County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. How are you all doing today?
Good.
You have before you, or you should in your packets, a right-of-way exchange agreement. This relates to a project that the county is overseeing to realign Thompson Creek Park Road at State Route 53. It's
The roundabout.
sort of phase 1 to set it up for the roundabout. That's right. This is the subject property. You see where Thompson Creek Park Road cuts through the tax parcel. And the proposed change, if you can see it, the dark shaded where it is shown for the realignment to set it up for the right of way for that GDOT intersection. These are the real property interests that the county will receive in the agreement. There's two sections of right of way on either side of the street, more on one than the other. Several permanent easements, several temporary construction easements. Here's an exhibit that shows the main portion of the right of way that's being received by the county. A small sliver on the south side is what is track 2 of the right of way. It's also shown here on the next page. The rest of the exhibits kind of highlight the permanent easements and the temporary easements throughout. There's some site distance easements. Drainage easements. This is what we're giving up. The old portion of the road. You see the surveyed measurement there. It's the hash lighter shaded area to the south where the current road bed is. And you're all familiar with this intersection. I assume it doesn't line up properly with Dawson Forest there. There's a statute under Title 32 that allows the county to enter into a private agreement to exchange property for road purposes. We had the values of the areas appraised. Of course, the county's section, what it's receiving is much higher because it's a much bigger road. There's just more square footage there that was appraised. In accordance with the statute, county has to receive at least equal value, if not more value, on an exchange, and we certainly accomplished that here. Basic elements of the agreement. We'll get the conveyance documents exchanged. We'll receive the property interest from the property owners within 30 days. We can get started on the project. Once the project's complete, which I believe is estimated to be 6 or 8 months.
I think it's a little longer.
A little longer than that.
6 or 8 months to do a roundabout.
Not the roundabout, just the realignment portion of it.
That's the real, yeah, we haven't gone out to bid yet on that. So once we get this approved, we'll be able to go out.
So we do this first before the roundabout.
Yes, sir. So they can, GDOT can in time.
It'll line up. Either way, once the project's complete, that's when the county will quit claim its interest in the old road over to the property owners to complete the exchange.
Are we doing that work there?
Pardon?
Are we doing that work in
We're
house?
doing some of it, yes, sir.
Any questions from anyone?
Questions for council?
I believe this was, we were going to ask to have this roll over.
Yes, sir. That's what I was getting ready to say.
To be voted
See if
on
we could
tonight.
vote on that tonight.
You good with that? Moving forward? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have county manager report, David.
Excuse me. You got your key indicator reports for the month of May, as well as the list of agreements and contracts is in your packet. We are excited to announce that Dawson Connect is now available through the Dawson County website. Dawson Connect is the intranet for Dawson County employees. Here, employees can find internal documents and information from various departments such as communications, public affairs, finance, human resources, and IT. IT received the total weight from the recycling event back in April was 6,791 pounds of old equipment was recycled, and Dawson County will get a check back for $455. The EnerGov portal for permitting is now live, so citizens and contractors can now apply for permits online. Through a grant, grant funds provided by the ASPCA, which is the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the National Animal Care and Control Association funded a national scholarship program to provide financial assistance for training to agencies responsible for animal care and control, specifically in rural and unrepresented areas. The Marshal's Office applied for and was awarded 2 full scholarships for department personnel to obtain Animal Control Officer Level 1 certifications via the NACA's online academy. In addition to the course, staff will have access to live and archived training webinars, allowing the department free access to continuing education for the next calendar year. The total value of the award and cost savings to the county is more than $1,000. With the certifications obtained from these 2 scholarships, all staff within the Marshal's Office will be certified ACOs. That's the Animal Control Officer, thereby increasing the department's ability to efficiently and safely address the growing number of animal complaints within the county, regardless of manpower limitations, and at 0 cost to the county. So congratulate them for that as well. In Public Works, the transfer station we visited Pickens County again with the chairman of operations. We've had 2 meetings with waste eliminators. We'll be bringing that to you, my probably next board meeting, to kind of lay out a recycling program plan that we hope will be similar to what Pickens is doing at basically at no cost. So we're getting all that together for you now. We'll have that shortly. The canoe launch, June the 22nd, 2022. We signed the GDNR EPD revised encroachment buffer application for resubmission. We're waiting on the status update from Insight Consulting. And then State Road 53 at Thompson Creek Road, which we just spoke about, roundabout, the right-of-way abandonment and realignment acceptance legal review for this evening. Once we get that done, we'll go ahead and get that bid out and be able to move forward. GDOT's ready to go, so they're waiting on us to get these, get this document and then get it going. We'll get our leg done, and then they'll tie into that. So that's going to be ongoing here shortly. Elliott Road, reviewed potential improvements there. Commissioner Gaines and myself met with one of the citizens out there, and Commissioner Dooley and I have spoken about it. So we're looking at submitting to GDOT on the next possibly LMIG. If we find that we have some excess funds, for example, when we did Hauser Mill, we had some excess funds left over. If we continue to have some, hopefully we'll be able to go ahead and do some of the improvements we need to do there. We kind of wanted to wait and see how the development litigation was going to turn out, so that we could make improvements on that side of the road and lessen the impact to the westerly side. And then the GEPD solid waste management survey is pending data retrieval for the year 2020 to 2021 in the data and form submittal. And then we have a special event coming up on June the 28th. So we owe a song to Commissioner Gaines for his birthday. So,
Any wishes?
so
All right, Sharon.
whoever wants to lead us.
This is your last opportunity to sing to me. Sharon.
You don't know. You don't know. I think, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chris. Happy birthday to you.
Best job Sharon's ever done.
I'm telling you.
You're improving.
Yeah, okay. Now listen. You mean I had room for improvement?
All right, questions of the county manager?
Thank you.
I
Go
got,
ahead.
Chairman, excuse me. You said you're gonna bring back the recycling. Are we gonna visit as far as repairing, replacing, rebuilding, getting it back to somewhat normal? I know we get a lot of calls from citizens. I'd like to see something. We maybe can discuss it. It might
Yes,
not
sir.
give you enough time, but once we, get through the recycling, let's get back on that and see if we can
That would be a part of
revisit
it.
that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions of the county manager? County attorney report.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman, and no executive session as far as I know.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, we'll take about a 10-minute break and we'll be back for the voting session. Thank you for your attendance.